The dust clung to his throat like a slow death. Every breath tasted of rust and regret, the scent of a dying world mingling with the acrid stench of plasma burns. He crouched behind the ruins of what had once been a towering spire, now reduced to skeletal remains jutting toward a sky choked with ash. The Empire had promised a swift conquest, another insignificant human world ground beneath its heel. Yet, as the days stretched into weeks, whispers of something else spread through the ranks, whispers of a ghost in the ruins, a specter wrapped in flesh, a woman who hunted them as if they were the ones trespassing on her world. She had no name, at least not one they knew. Only the stories remained. A single shot, a single kill. Never seen, never heard. Just a shadow in the rubble, waiting. His squad had been sent to put an end to the rumors. 15 men, each hardened by a dozen campaigns, each assured that they were the ones who dictated the tide of war. They had walked through the broken streets with the arrogance of conquerors, their armor gleaming, their rifles primed. They believed themselves untouchable. Then the first shot rang out. It was not a wild, desperate spray of gunfire. It was not a burst from some frightened resistance fighter, cowering in the dark. It was a whisper through the air, a singular moment of absolute precision. Sergeant Varen's helmet cracked apart, his body seizing before crumpling to the ground. No scream, no final words. Just death, immediate and efficient. They scattered, instincts taking over. Training had no place here. Doctrine meant nothing when death could come from anywhere. The sniper did not move. There was no shift in the rubble, no flicker of motion. The enemy was nowhere and everywhere. He remembered how silence became their enemy then. How the air itself felt wrong, thick with something unseen. How they turned their backs on one another, each man waiting for the next shot, each heartbeat counting down to the moment they would cease to be. Another shot. Another body. They had taken cover, set up scanners, swept the buildings, tried to think like hunters instead of prey. But she was beyond them. She did not wait for mistakes, she created them. A noise in the distance, a trick of the light, the way the wind stirred the debris. Every movement they made, every shift in position, had been calculated before they even thought to make it. Panic had set in by the time they realized the truth. This was not a battle. This was an execution. He had seen Imperial commanders lead entire legions against fortified positions, had watched planetary defenses crumble under orbital bombardments. And yet, for all their strength, all their strategy, the Empire had never faced an enemy like this. By the time night fell, there were only 5 of them left. They had not seen her, not once. Only the dead that littered their path, bodies left where they fell, a message written in silence. Each man she took changed them. Stripped away their belief in victory, their faith in superiority. The whispers that had once been dismissed as myth were now gospel. He had watched seasoned warriors tremble, hands gripping weapons that would do them no good. The Empire had bred them to be killers, conquerors, the chosen. But here, in these ruins, they were nothing more than frightened animals. "Where is she?" one of them had whispered, voice tight with fear. He had no answer. None of them did. They had tried everything. Drones sent skyward fell in smoking pieces before they even completed a scan. Heat signatures revealed only the dying. They had fired blind into the ruins, but the only thing they had hit was stone. She was waiting. She was always waiting. The 4th man fell before he even had time to register the shot. 3 left. He no longer knew their names. They had become ghosts themselves, nameless figures staggering through a city that had already claimed them. Hope was a forgotten thing. The Empire would not come for them. They were already dead. The comms crackled to life, and for the first time, he heard her voice. "Go home." The words carried no malice, no rage. Just a simple command. A mercy they did not deserve. One of the remaining soldiers, his face lost behind the visor, just another doomed soul, raised his rifle in response. He did not get the chance to fire. 2 left. He had stopped flinching at the sound of bodies hitting the ground. They had stumbled into a ruined tower, the structure barely holding itself together. It was shelter, a temporary reprieve. He had felt the weight of the rifle in his hands, had stared at the dust-covered floor, at the blood smeared against the walls. She could have killed him then, could have ended it. But she didn't. Instead, she waited. Let the silence press down upon him. Let him feel the weight of the moment. Let him know that survival was not his to decide. He turned to the last man beside him, a soldier who had once stood at attention, rigid with the certainty of the Empire's might. Now, that same man sat with his back to the wall, rifle limp in his hands, helmet discarded. "Do you believe in ghosts?" the man murmured. He had wanted to laugh, to scoff, to remind him that they were soldiers of the Empire, that they were the ones who dictated reality. But he couldn't, because ghosts were real. He had seen her work, had felt her presence with every breath. She was not a legend. She was not a story. She was death, given form. The man beside him sighed, a slow, defeated sound. Then he stood, walked toward the broken window, and stared out over the ruins. "I surrender," he said. The shot was almost gentle. Alone now. He sat there for what felt like hours, staring at nothing, feeling the weight of everything. Then he felt it. A presence. Not seen, not heard. Just felt. He turned his head slowly, and there she was. She did not wear armor, did not carry the bulk of a soldier's burden. Her weapon rested easily in her grip, as much a part of her as the breath in her lungs. She had no insignia, no marks of rank. The Empire would have dismissed her on sight. And yet, she had brought it to its knees. She did not raise her rifle. She did not speak. She only watched. And in that moment, he understood. The Empire had never truly feared armies. It had never feared fleets, or firepower, or grand strategy. It feared her. It feared the idea of her. Because she was proof that no matter how strong they believed themselves to be, no matter how absolute their dominion, there would always be those who stood against them. And won. She turned then, stepping back into the shadows, vanishing into the ruins. Leaving him alone, with nothing but silence. And the knowledge that he had been spared. He did not know why. But as he sat there, listening to the stillness, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Empire would never forget her. And neither would he. The silence stretched like a noose around his throat. The ruins loomed in every direction, a labyrinth of broken steel and shattered stone, a graveyard of empire and defiance alike. He remained still, his breath shallow, his fingers locked around a rifle that had long since become useless. Somewhere in the distance, the wind whispered through the ruins, a ghostly reminder of all that had been lost. She was still out there. The sniper had let him live, but mercy did not erase fear. If anything, it deepened it. He had watched his squad, hardened killers of the Empire, reduced to whispers and bloodstains in the dirt. He had seen a force that had conquered worlds falter beneath the weight of a single unseen adversary. He had felt the gaze of something far more dangerous than a simple soldier, someone who did not kill for sport, but because it was necessary. He was alone now. But she wasn't. She had the shadows, the silence, the terrain that bent to her will. The ruins were her kingdom, and he was nothing more than an intruder who had outlived his welcome. The rifle in his hands felt heavy, useless. He had seen the others die, seen them drop before their screams could even form. How many rounds had they fired? How much ammunition had they wasted trying to kill a ghost? She had never returned fire out of desperation. Every shot had been deliberate, each death a quiet lesson. He had been allowed to live, but he had no illusions. This was not kindness. This was a warning. He pressed his back against the remains of a collapsed column, his armor scraped and dented, his visor cracked. The Empire had trained him to fight overwhelming odds, but nothing had prepared him for this. In the Empire's doctrine, wars were won with superior firepower, overwhelming numbers, and unwavering discipline. This planet should have fallen in days. Instead, it had become a tomb. And she was its warden. He forced himself to move. One foot forward, then another. The city loomed in all directions, each alleyway and shattered building a potential killing ground. The instinct to flee clawed at him, but he knew better. Running meant exposing himself. Running meant death. He needed to think. He needed to become something other than prey. The sniper had outmaneuvered them from the beginning, not because she had superior numbers, but because she understood fear. The moment the first man had fallen, she had already won. The squad had scattered, their cohesion shattered, their minds consumed with the knowledge that they were being hunted. She had let them fester in their own panic, let them make mistakes, let them destroy themselves before she ever had to fire another shot. That was the brilliance of it. That was why the Empire feared her. He reached a clearing where a collapsed overpass had buried part of the street below. Bodies lay where they had fallen, sprawled across the ruins like discarded relics. Some had died instantly, heads snapped back, chests punctured with precise, clinical efficiency. Others had tried to run. It hadn't mattered. He stepped over them, his pulse a slow, steady drum in his ears. These had been the best soldiers the Empire had to offer. And yet, they had died like animals. A flash of movement. He froze, rifle snapping up, eyes scanning the rubble. Nothing. Just shadows shifting with the wind, just the weight of his own paranoia pressing down on him. He exhaled through his nose, forcing his muscles to loosen, forcing the grip on his weapon to steady. He could not afford to lose himself to fear. He had to think like her. What would she expect? His every move had been predictable thus far. The squad had done what Imperial soldiers always did: secure high ground, deploy scanners, establish firing positions. It had done nothing but make them easier targets. He needed to do the opposite. Slowly, carefully, he turned away from the clear path ahead and moved into the ruins, slipping between jagged remains of old buildings, moving lower instead of higher. The Empire valued dominance, commanding the battlefield from above, asserting control. But she had never fought for control. She fought to disappear. So he disappeared. He moved through the wreckage like a shadow, crouched low, listening. The sound of distant wind. The faint hum of broken infrastructure struggling to function. But no gunfire. No movement. Was she still watching? Of course she was. The realization settled in his stomach like ice. This was not a battlefield. This was her home. He pressed his back against the cold steel of a wrecked transport, its hull caved in from an old explosion. The air smelled of rust and decay, of time erasing the remnants of war. His fingers brushed against the hilt of his combat knife, a far cry from the precision of a sniper rifle but comforting nonetheless. A thought struck him then. A terrible, quiet thought. She had spared him. Why? Every other man had died. Not with cruelty, but with purpose. They had been threats. But him. He had been left alive, left to stumble through the ruins, left to question. What made him different? Something shifted in the air. A whisper of motion. He turned, slow and deliberate. A figure, barely visible, perched on the remains of an old framework above him. Not hidden, not concealed. Just there, watching. She had never left. His grip on the rifle tightened, but he did not raise it. He did not move at all. Neither did she. For a long, breathless moment, they regarded one another. She was not what he had expected. Not a brute, not an unhinged warrior drenched in the madness of war. She was calm, composed, her posture neither aggressive nor relaxed. Just waiting. He understood then. The Empire did not fear her simply because she was an effective killer. It did not fear her because of the bodies she left in her wake. It feared her because she did not fight like them. She did not seek victory in battle. She did not march in formation, did not adhere to doctrines of overwhelming force. She fought wars of patience, of attrition, of psychology. She turned the enemy against itself, made it doubt, made it question, made it afraid. And in the Empire's rigid, inflexible world, that was something it could never prepare for. She could not be crushed beneath orbital bombardment. She could not be cowed by the might of imperial fleets. Because she did not fight wars to win them. She fought wars to make them unwinnable. And that was why she was still alive. His lips parted, a question forming, but he never spoke it. She had already moved, stepping back into the ruins, vanishing like a breath of wind through the dust. Gone. The silence remained, pressing down on him, forcing him to confront the truth that had been lurking beneath his thoughts since the first shot had rung out. He had never been spared. He had been chosen. To see. To understand. And, perhaps, to carry a message back to the Empire. A warning. He inhaled slowly, the weight of his rifle still heavy in his hands. He had entered these ruins as a soldier of the Empire, armed with certainty, cloaked in arrogance. He had believed in power, in conquest, in the unshakable dominion of his people. Now, all that remained was the quiet understanding of just how fragile that dominion truly was. The Empire had always feared rebellion, feared organized resistance, feared the strength of numbers. But that was not its greatest enemy. Its greatest enemy was something much smaller, much quieter. A single, unseen adversary. One who could teach others to see what he now saw. The realization settled in his bones, colder than the wind that swept through the ruins. The Empire was right to be afraid. The shuttle's interior hummed with restrained power, its engines carving a silent path through the void. He sat stiff-backed in his seat, armor cleaned but still bearing the scars of the battlefield. The insignia on his shoulder marked him as a survivor, but he knew better. There were no survivors. Only messengers. Across from him, an Imperial officer studied him with unreadable eyes. The man's uniform was crisp, his posture unyielding, his expression carefully sculpted neutrality. But beneath it, there was something else, something rarely seen in the upper ranks of the Empire. You were the last? The officer finally asked. He nodded once. The officer exhaled through his nose, fingers tapping against the metal armrest of his seat. And you're sure it was just one? A single nod again. The officer's jaw tightened. Explain. He had explained it a dozen times already, to debriefing officers, to analysts, to men who had never stepped foot on the planet but thought they could dissect its ghosts from the safety of high command. None of them understood. They saw numbers. He had seen something else. Still, he spoke. The squad landed at 0400. Our objective was to neutralize scattered resistance remnants. The words came automatically, clipped and precise, devoid of emotion. That was how they wanted it. That was how they needed it. The officer nodded, waiting. The first kill happened within the hour. Varen's helmet cracking. A body collapsing without a sound. A single shot. Scans failed to locate the shooter. We attempted to secure a vantage point but were cut down methodically. The officer's fingers twitched. You mean ambushed? No, his voice was steady. Hunted. That word lingered. Heavy. Unwelcome. The officer shifted. You said she spoke to you? He hesitated. He hadn't told them everything. Some things couldn't be put into reports. Some things lived only in the silence between words. Yes. What did she say? A pause. Go home. The officer's brows furrowed, but he didn't interrupt. We were down to 2 men by then, he continued. She left me alive. The officer scoffed. And you think that was mercy? No. The silence stretched. She wanted me to see, he added. To see what? The question was sharp, but he knew it wasn't meant for him. It was meant for the void, for the space between what the Empire believed and what it now feared. To see why the Empire is afraid, he answered. The officer's expression darkened. The Empire fears no one. A lie. One told too often to be questioned. But he had seen the truth. She's not fighting a war, he said quietly. She's proving a point. The officer leaned forward. What point? He met the man's gaze. That she only needs one shot. The words landed like a blow. The officer's mouth tightened, but he didn't argue. There was nothing to argue. For a long moment, the hum of the ship was the only sound between them. Then, the officer stood. The Admiral will see you now. The room beyond the shuttle bay was a stark contrast to the ruins he had left behind. Polished steel, cold lighting, the faint scent of sterilized air. A reminder that the Empire believed itself above the dirt and blood of war. but not above fear. The admiral stood at the far end of the room, hands clasped behind his back. He did not turn as they entered. "You saw her," the admiral said. "Yes." The admiral finally turned. His eyes were sharp, analytical, weighing the words before they were even spoken. "Describe her." He did. Not her features, those weren't what mattered. What mattered was the way she moved, the way she fought, the way she waited. She was alone? Yes. A beat of silence. "Do you know how many men we have lost to that world?" the admiral asked. He didn't answer. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. "She was a soldier once," the admiral continued. "One of ours." That sent a ripple through him. "We trained her. We made her." The admiral's gaze was unreadable. "And now she has become the lesson we never wanted to learn." The officer at his side shifted. "We could deploy a strike team. She would see them coming." The admiral's voice was sharp. "She would pick them apart before they even knew they were dead." The officer bristled. "Then orbital bombardment." "She's not a building to be burned," the admiral snapped. "She's an idea. And ideas don't die under fire." The room fell into silence again. He watched the admiral carefully. The man was old enough to have seen 1,000 wars. He had ordered the destruction of planets, commanded fleets that turned civilizations to ash. And yet, he looked troubled. "What are your orders?" the officer asked. The admiral's gaze flickered to him. "You were left alive," the admiral said. "Why?" He wasn't sure of the answer. "Not entirely. She wants the Empire to understand." The admiral exhaled. "Then perhaps we should." The officer stiffened. "Sir." The admiral turned back to the viewport, staring into the endless black beyond. "She knows we cannot win." The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of inevitability. "She knows that the moment we step onto that battlefield, we have already lost." The officer still looked ready to argue, but he had no words to fight something so absolute. The admiral turned back to him. "If you had one shot," he said slowly, "one chance to end this, could you take it?" His blood turned to ice. "You want me to kill her?" The admiral's eyes bore into him. "You were spared. That gives you an opportunity." A slow, sinking feeling curled in his stomach. "You want to send me back?" The admiral nodded. "You said she's proving a point. So prove one of your own." He swallowed. He had known, deep down, that this was inevitable. That the Empire could not walk away from what it feared. That it would try, even now, to turn him into a weapon. But he wasn't sure that was a fight he could win. Because she had already won. Still, he nodded. Because he had no other choice. Because this was what the Empire did. They sent men to die. And now, they were sending him. The wind carried the scent of rust and decay through the ruins, a familiar lingering presence that clung to every shattered structure. He moved carefully, his footfalls quiet against the rubble, his breathing steady despite the tension coiled within him. The Empire had sent him back, and he had obeyed, because disobedience was not an option. Because even now, some part of him clung to the idea that this war could still be won. But deep down, he knew the truth. She was watching him. She had always been watching him. The ruins stretched ahead, a maze of broken steel and shattered stone. He knew this place now, had walked it before, had bled through its corridors. His orders were simple: find her, take the shot, end the war before it spread further. Simple orders. Impossible execution. Because he knew what they didn't. She wasn't a target. She was the battlefield itself. His rifle was steady in his hands, the scope adjusted for the long-range precision the Empire demanded. But the weight of it felt wrong, heavy with something more than steel. It was the weight of a decision already made for him. A decision he wasn't sure he could follow through with. The Empire believed in firepower, in overwhelming force, in bending the galaxy to its will through sheer, undeniable might. But that had never been the war she fought. She was something else entirely. and he was about to face her again. A whisper of movement. His grip tightened. She was near. He exhaled slowly, turning, scanning the ruins with the patience of a man who knew that hesitation meant death. He had fought against her before, had lost everything to her precision, to her unshakable control. And yet, she had spared him. Why? The question gnawed at him, an unspoken truth buried beneath the orders that had sent him back here. He could have fled, could have disappeared into the void, escaped the war entirely. But he had returned. Not for the Empire. Not for duty. For answers. A flash of movement above. He reacted instinctively, diving behind cover, pressing his back against the cold steel of a collapsed structure. His breathing slowed. She could have killed him already. So why hadn't she? Silence stretched between them, the kind that spoke louder than any battlefield scream. He tightened his grip on his rifle, but he did not raise it. He was being watched, measured, tested. Then, a voice, quiet, steady, controlled. You came back. He turned his head slightly, his visor catching a glimpse of the figure perched above him. She wasn't hiding. She didn't need to. The rifle was slung across her back, untouched. A challenge or an invitation. His voice came out steady. They sent me to kill you. A small, humorless smile tugged at her lips. Of course they did. Silence again. She had the advantage. She always had the advantage. But she hadn't taken it. Because this wasn't about the kill. It never had been. You could have ended this war already, he said. She tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. This war was over before it even started. He frowned. The Empire doesn't see it that way. She exhaled, the faintest trace of something resembling amusement flickering across her face. The Empire doesn't see a lot of things. His fingers flexed around the rifle, uncertainty digging into his skin like a blade. I take the shot, he said slowly, and nothing changes. She nodded once. I don't take the shot, he continued, and I become the enemy. Another nod. A choice. A war decided not by firepower, not by numbers, but by the space between a trigger and the pull. She had given him an out before. Had left him alive. Had let him carry a message back to the Empire. And now, she was giving him another choice. But this time, it wasn't about survival. It was about belief. What do you want from me? He asked. Her eyes met his, steady and unwavering. The truth. He almost laughed. The Empire doesn't care about the truth. Then why are you here? The question struck deeper than it should have. Because he wasn't here for the Empire. He wasn't here for orders. He was here because he had seen something that no one else in the Empire had seen. Because he understood what they refused to accept. Because he knew what she had known all along. This war wasn't about victory. It was about proving it couldn't be won. His grip on the rifle loosened. He exhaled. The war wasn't over. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to walk away.